If you're going to Paris soon, you might be super excited, and for good reasons. And you might also want to have a little bit of history background before arriving. So if it's the case, you're at the right place, and I will be very glad to make this as simple as possible for you in this YouTube video about Paris History 101. Curiosity is a bad thing, they said when we were kids, and I couldn't agree less. The least we can say is that the history of Paris is not a long and quiet river. We had invasions, wars, epidemics, and we had a lot of bad things happened. But it didn't prevent the city from thriving economically and culturally on numerous occasions. So, the first settlers were the Parisi. We're around 2500 before Christ, and they established themselves in the west suburb of Paris. They were very flourishing and independent, and they had their own currency. They were defeated and destroyed by the Roman invasion. The Romans created an outpost called Lutetia, and we owe them a booming city on the left bank and on the Ile de la Cité inside Paris. It's a Gallo-Roman city with a forum, thermal baths, arenas. At that time we have around 5,000 inhabitants who enjoy a luxurious life thanks to trade. Today you can still find some remains of the Roman period in Paris, and you can visit them. It's les Arènes de Lutèce, which was a big theater, you can still find it, or les Thermes de Cluny, where they were basing, but it was a social place to be and meet people. Around the 3rd century, barbarian attacks left Lutèce, which is the old name of Paris, ruined and forsaken, and the remaining population withdrew on the Ile de la Cité. At this time, the city takes its Gaulish name, with a small spelling modification, and it's the creation of Paris. In 451, Saint Geneviève organized the resistance of Paris and prevented the invasions of the Huns, led by a man called Attila. You can find a huge statue of Saint Geneviève, who is the protector of Paris, near the Ile Saint-Louis in the middle of Paris. Fun fact about the sculptor, he also is the one who created the big Corcovado in Brazil. At the fall of the Roman Empire, Paris was booming. Around 486, the Franks settled in Paris, and Clovis, their king, made it its capital in 508. And tada! Clovis' kingdom became France. France was born at that time. Under Charlemagne, Paris lost its notoriety, and it was Aix-de-la-Chapelle, which is a town in the east side of France, that became the capital of the Carolingian Empire in France. And in 1885, the ruthless Vikings from the north attacked Paris, and the Parisians resisted courageously and successfully. The new king of France in 987, Hugues Capet and his successors will make then Paris their capital again. So the Palais de la Cité and the Ile de la Cité in Paris became to be the royal residence back then again. From then on, l'Ile de la Cité was the center of political and religious authorities in France. Life mainly happened on the right bank of the Seine, the river Seine, and on the left bank you only have a few monasteries and abbeys, and there were very few locations with an economic life at that time over there. In 1176, before leaving on a crusade, Philip Auguste had built a protection wall to protect the city. It was 5.3 kilometers long, and 67 towers were located on the wall. So you can see a part of it when you visit the Marais today. It's part of the past. It's Following in the Middle Ages, the 100-year war, as we call it, was a very difficult period for Paris, and we owe this period the Château de Vincennes, which were the residence of Charles Quint, and the Bastille Fortress also. In 1420, the city of Paris was delivered from the English, and the court settled in the Château de la Loire. Joan of Arc, Jeanne d'Arc, tried without success to liberate Paris, but her action was not in vain because Paris would return in 1435 by the English. François Ier, who was king in 1515, re-established the royal residence back to Paris in 1528. And at that time, a lot of work began throughout the city. It's a time where we began to see the Louvre being built, major renovation took place, the river Seine got some first quay along it, and the city was counting 280,000 inhabitants at that time. It was the largest city in Western Europe. Arrival of music, fashion and classical dance throughout the Italian Renaissance. Henri IV and then Richelieu under Louis XIII put back on its feet and modernized it a little bit more. At that time, Paris became a world capital, and the big houses that you can see in the Marais come from this period. In 1682, Louis XIV moved the court and the government to Versailles, but Paris kept its title of capital. And Louis XV requested a lot of work in Paris. We owe him the beautiful Place de la Concorde, the Panthéon, the military school, and so on and so on. Then the 18th century is of course the age of the Enlightenment in Paris too, which is the time where we will see flourish Saint-Germain district, where a lot of debate took place over there. So it's a very interesting place to visit. The monarchy was weakened by many factors, and then we had the big French Revolution in 1789, putting an end to the monarchy in France by the monarchy of divine right in France. So then followed very ideological divisions and strong chaos among the country for a long period of time. Arrived Napoleon, and many changes with him, like l'Arc de Triomphe, the transformation of la Chapelle des Invalides, the colonne de la Place Vendôme, the Carrousel du Louvre, among others. When we see the acronym N somewhere in Paris, it's him, Napoleon. You can visit l'Arc de Triomphe and les Invalides, and it's very interesting. After a rapid period back to monarchy, it was the Second Empire in France and the reign of Napoleon III. We had several Napoleons. We owe him major modernization of Paris, which is the big street with Baron Haussmann from 1852 to around 1870. Major traffic routes were created, street lights with city gas, sidewalks. In 1870 we had a war with Germany, and then afterwards we enter La Belle Époque and its universal exhibition. So, ta-da! This is the time when appears the Eiffel Tower. And in 1889, the Eiffel Tower was the biggest building elsewhere. The most important universal exhibition was the one of 1900, which exposed the progresses of the Second Industrial Revolution. So we see at that time electricity, metro, cars, planes. It's a gigantic event. And we also owe the Grand Palais et le Petit Palais and the Pont Alexandre III at this time of the exhibition. Back then, Paris was the avant-garde of technology and arts. In the 20th century, we of course had a lot of progress, but we also had the two wars, and that was very, very painful to be under the German occupation. So you can visit the Museum of la Libération de Paris, which is very, very interesting, a very beautiful museum. Later on in this century, we had l'Arche de la Défense, the Pyramide du Louvre, and many other things. So let's dive in some fun facts about Paris. In 1240, church bells, towers are connected to clocks. So at that time, it's now possible to know when everybody's going to have lunch, when everybody's going to be connected on some level, as everybody has the same time. On 1608, the River Seine froze, which I've never seen in my life. In 1660, In 1660, it's the arrival of coffee beans in France. In 1728, it's the appearance. In 1728, it's the time when streets become bare. In 1728, it's the time when streets began to have names. In 1827, it's the first time we have a giraffe in France offered by Egypt. And in 1976, it's the first